Welcome back to Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for floor remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer. Senators returned to Washington to begin the summer work period on June 2nd. Thune discussed an anti-Semitic attack in Boulder, Colorado the day before and business facing the Senate in June. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, before I begin, I want to mention Sunday's attack in Boulder, Colorado. A man armed with incendiary devices and shouting anti-Israel slogans attacked a peaceful event held to draw attention to the plight of Israeli hostages in Gaza. 8 individuals were injured, at least 2 so severely that they had to be airlifted to a burn unit. This attack would be horrifying in and of itself, but it is particularly disturbing given that it comes on the heels of the murder of 2 Israeli embassy staffers here in D.C. just 2 weeks ago. It goes without saying that there is no place for this kind of violence in our society, and we must forcefully condemn anti-Semitism and do everything we can to stand with and protect our Jewish neighbors. My prayers are with all those injured, with their families, and with the Jewish community in Boulder and across the country. Mr. President, we're kicking off the June work period today. It's going to be a busy month. We have a lot to get done. First, we'll continue to focus on confirming the President's nominees. The President needs to have his team in place so that he can do the job he was elected to do, and we're going to continue to deliver. It's disappointing that Democrats have chosen to slow down this process by gumming up the works on even non-controversial nominations. But despite Democrats, we're still managing to confirm civilian nominees at a faster pace so far than in either of the previous two administrations. And we will continue to move expeditiously to build out the President's administration. On the legislative side, Mr. President, our first order of business this week will be completing work on the Genius Act. This bipartisan legislation will finally create a clear regulatory framework for stablecoins, a framework that will protect consumers and our national security while helping to keep the United States at the forefront of financial innovation. And I'm hoping that we can finish up this legislation in the very near future. Another item high on our list to begin work on in June is a rescissions package the White House intends to send Congress this week. The administration has identified a number of wasteful uses of taxpayer dollars, and we will be taking up this package and eliminating this waste. We'll make that a priority, Mr. President. We also stand ready to provide President Trump with any tools he needs to get Russia to finally come to the table in a real way. President Trump has invested considerable time in working to end the bloodshed in Ukraine, but Vladimir Putin appears more interested in prolonging the war than in pursuing peace. And finally, of course, Mr. President, this work period we will focus, on taking up legislation to permanently extend tax relief for hardworking Americans, strengthen our border, energy, and national security. The tax relief that Republicans passed in 2017, tax relief that poured more money in the pockets of working Americans, is set to expire at the end of this year. And if Congress doesn't act, Americans making less than $400,000 a year will see a $2.6 trillion tax hike in 2026. We are not going to let that happen. And our biggest focus this month will be completing this tax relief legislation with the goal of getting the final bill to the President before the 4th of July. It's going to be a very busy month, Mr. President, and I'm looking forward to the work ahead.
Schumer also discussed the Boulder attack before remarks on nuclear talks with Iran and peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. He addressed the Big Beautiful Bill Act, then pending from the House, and more.
Mr. President, today, Jewish Americans and all Americans grieve in the aftermath of another anti-Semitic attack that took place yesterday in Boulder, Colorado. This time, it was an elderly group of people peacefully calling for the release of hostages held by Hamas, brutally attacked on the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, which celebrates God giving the Torah to the Jewish people. This morning, I spoke with senior officials at the FBI and urged them to use the full extent of their power to investigate this heinous attack. These victims did nothing wrong. They aren't involved with the tragic conflict in the Middle East. It's reported that one of the victims was even a Holocaust survivor. After all they were doing was expressing a simple plea: bring the hostages home. And because of their Jewish identity, they were targeted by hate. When anti-Semitism is allowed to fester in more quarters of society, it historically leads to more terrorism and violence. What happened in Washington and in Boulder is exactly that. Assigning collective or hereditary blame to Jews for what is happening right now in the Middle East is blatantly anti-Semitic, and it is happening in too many corners of America today. Our prayers are with the victims of the attack and their families, and we thank the first responders who apprehended the suspect before things got even worse. Now on Iran and the recent news there. White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have said publicly that the U.S. will not allow Iran to enrich uranium and will demand full dismantlement of Iran's nuclear facilities. But earlier today, Axios reported that there's a proposed side deal in the works between the Trump administration and Iran that will give them far more flexibility of their nuclear ambitions. This report, if true, is terribly troubling. What is in this so-called side deal? The administration needs to come clean immediately, make it public, or risk squandering crucial leverage against Iran. Any negotiation with Iran should openly and transparently use all of our leverage and address non-nuclear issues like their support for terrorism and regional proxies. The administration must clarify what they might be hiding from the American people. Some of my colleagues on the other side said in 2015, with regards to earlier negotiations on the last Iran nuclear deal, that the administration essentially asked Congress to trust but not verify. That's what they said back then. It's disturbing that the Trump administration is preparing to do just that, cutting a secret side deal that avoids congressional oversight and asks Congress to trust but not verify. Any deal between the U.S. and Iran must be one Congress and the public can fully and transparently evaluate. Now on Ukraine. Yesterday, Ukrainian forces carried out one of the most significant attacks against military targets of the entire Ukrainian war. The single best thing President Trump can do to strengthen Ukraine's hand right now is to show that the U.S. stands firmly behind them and squarely against Russia. But so far, Trump has not done that. Putin is a clear villain and a bully. So where is Donald Trump's backbone? Where's his conviction? Where's that toughness he likes to project? Frankly, senators from both sides of the aisle are getting tired of Donald Trump's wishy-washy approach to Putin. If Donald Trump won't stand up to him, the Senate must. I support legislation by Senators Blumenthal and Graham that would land a hammer blow of sanctions in a tougher way than we ever have done before against Russia. 80 senators from both sides of the aisle, including Leader Thune and myself, co-sponsor this bill. Both sides should quickly finish negotiating any necessary changes to the bill, and then we should put this sanctions bill on the floor for a vote as soon as possible. It's very much needed, and it's needed now. But then we must do more. The administration should turn over every stone to identify more air defense systems that we or our allies can send Ukraine, including ammunition for its Patriot systems. This will save civilian lives. And the U.S. should keep going and giving more drone and counter-drone support, greater intel sharing. These are things the administration could start doing right now. Now on reconciliation. What Senate Republicans will try to do this month is a travesty. They're picking up right where House Republicans left off, trying to ram through this chamber Donald Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. As the Senate returns to session, we do not yet have a text for the Republicans' mega bill, but make no mistake, the fight against this bill is ramping up today. It starts with Senate Democrats showing the American people what the bill actually is: one ugly bill. One of the most reckless, odious, and self-serving pieces of legislation we've seen in a long time. Today, I want to share broadly how Senate Democrats will fight this bill with every fiber of our being. It's going to be a long and drawn-out fight, but the American people deserve to see precisely how cruel, how vindictive, how ugly this big bill truly is. Case in point, House Republicans tucked into their bill a nasty provision that will restrict the power of judges to hold government officials in contempt. It's very clear what's going on here. Republicans want to codify into law Donald Trump's attack against our judicial system. They want to make our courts toothless by nullifying their contempt powers and make it easier for the Trump administration to ignore the courts. This is nothing less than a naked attack against the separation of powers. If Senate Republicans include this authoritarian provision in their bill, Democrats will fight it tooth and nail. Will not stand by while Republicans try to sabotage our courts, and I fervently believe their effort will not win the day. Now, yesterday I also spoke with Leader Jeffries about how both chambers can work together to fight back against this bill. This Wednesday, Senator Klobuchar and I have also invited House Democratic ranking members to meet with our caucus and share firsthand insight from their fight in the House, including key Republican fault lines. In all likelihood, this bill will continue to undergo changes and get sent back to the House. For that reason, Democratic unity will be our strongest weapon as we defend the American people from harms contained in the bill. Our fight in the coming weeks, of course, is not just procedural. It's going to happen on every front, in committees, in public hearings, in the birdbath, online, in public, and here on this floor. The Republican plan is very simple: sell out working and middle-class Americans to line the pockets of the ultra wealthy and well-connected. And let's talk about the deficit. For years, Republicans screamed about fiscal responsibility. But now, Republicans are backing a bill that could add over $50 trillion to the national debt over 30 years. Even Elon Musk said this bill is a bad idea. That should tell you something. And most cravenly of all, Republicans are cooking the books so they can pretend their tax breaks won't impact the debt. Republicans are planning to use the budget chair's Section 312 authority under the Congressional Budget Act in an unprecedented and illegitimate manner to run roughshod over the Byrd Rule. The bottom line is this: Republicans' one ugly bill is a farce. It's betraying our values, it's a threat to working families, and it's a giveaway to the very few at the expense of the many. Senate Democrats will fight this bill in committee, on the floor, and in the court of public opinion every step, every day, and every possible way. I believe to my core that the American people, when they truly know what this bill is all about, if they see how shamelessly it enriches the wealthy and everyone else, the American people will reject it outright.
This program is copyrighted by Federal Network, Incorporated, and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast. You can watch live action from Congress on our YouTube channel at FedNet TV,